All right, so what if the healthcare industry isn't really about keeping you healthy?
Wait, you're not seriously going to suggest?
Oh, I am. Think about it. What if it's more about keeping you dependent? Treating symptoms instead of curing the root cause, drawing it out.
You know what? That's not even far-fetched. Honestly, we've got billion-dollar ad campaigns for pills that fix exactly one thing, but kind of make 5 other things worse. It's like a revolving door of symptoms at this point.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. What's the incentive to cure someone if you can keep charging them for treatment forever, right?
Yeah, and this isn't just, conspiracy theory territory either. This is data, like cold, hard evidence of a system built to rake in profits, not miracles. So,
Right. And today, we're pulling the curtain back on this whole system. We're talking the pharmaceutical machine, how it's become, like, the ultimate profit engine. And we'll show how it maybe even stands in the way of actual cures.
oh yeah, and spoiler alert, it's way worse than you think. Buckle up, people. All right, Jason, so exactly how did Big Pharma leap from being just another player to, let's be real, running the show with profits that make even the tech giants jealous?
It's wild when you think about it, right? Pharma makes more money than almost any other sector, and it's because their whole model is, we're talking pricing, patents, monopolies. The stuff that builds these impenetrable castles around drugs.
You mean like charging patients $500 for a pill that costs 25 cents to make?
Exactly, because they can. Patents basically give them a locked-in monopoly for, 20 years? That's 2 decades to hike up prices and squash competition. And even as the patents expire, they pivot to evergreening, tweaking the formula slightly so they can extend exclusivity all over again.
Right. And it's not just the patents either. They price things by saying, how much is your life worth? It's extortion, but legal. They call it value-based pricing.
Which is like saying, how much can we get away with before you're broke? And it's all justified by research costs, which, don't get me wrong, research is expensive. But profits? They're way beyond recouping those costs.
Way beyond. I saw one report saying the CEO of a major pharma company earned, wait for it, $45 million last year. Meanwhile, people can't afford insulin. Like the math does not math.
It's insane. And insulin, for example, discoverers sold the patent for $1 because they wanted it to help humanity. $1. Now pharma companies jack up the price by like 1,200%.
Yeah, it's one of the most blatant cases of a life-saving drug turned into a cash cow. But they're not even the worst offenders. Wait till we get to Purdue Pharma. Speaking of the worst offenders, Purdue Pharma takes it to a whole new level. These guys didn't just bend the rules, they basically engineered the opioid epidemic, right?
Yeah, totally calculated. OxyContin, marketed as this miracle painkiller. Non-addictive, they said. Which, let's be real, was a straight-up lie.
And they knew it too. Like, internal documents later showed they were fully aware how addictive it was. And instead of, doing something ethical, they doubled down on aggressive marketing. They even targeted doctors who were already overprescribing pain meds.
Exactly. They weaponized trust, got doctors on board by telling them, hey, don't worry, this is totally safe. And when patients started developing tolerance or dependency, they twisted it to say, well, they must need higher doses.
It's like the ultimate bait and switch. And it worked. The prescriptions skyrocketed, profits went through the roof, and oh yeah, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. Just minor details to them, though.
Right. And then comes the domino effect. I mean, how do we go from oxy to fentanyl? It's like they opened Pandora's box, and now we've got this avalanche of overdoses that just keeps accelerating.
Yes. Fentanyl, it's like the nuclear bomb of opioids. So much stronger, like 100 times more potent than morphine. And here's the thing. It started as a legitimate pain management tool, but spiraled into this massive illicit crisis. Cartels jumped in, manufacturing it on a scale that's insane.
But part of the blame still falls on the pharmaceutical companies, because their tactics opened the door. They normalized these drugs, and when regulators clamped down, demand didn't just disappear. It shifted into black markets.
And now, the overdoses are a public health crisis. We're talking like the leading cause of death for people under 50. And you know what's wild? Purdue wasn't the only player. There's this whole network of companies, distributors, and even regulators who, at best, turned a blind eye, or at worst, were complicit. And it's not just Big Pharma engineering this crisis. They had accomplices. Think about it. These epic profit schemes weren't happening in a vacuum. The insurance industry, for one, played a huge role in making all of this possible.
Totally. And insurance plays along in ways that are just diabolical. I mean, think about their famous tactics. Deny, delay, defraud. It's practically their motto. I even wrote a book titled exactly that. It's on Amazon for anyone looking.
Oh yeah, that book goes deep. And they've perfected the art of it, like when they deny coverage for a life-saving treatment because it's experimental or not medically necessary. It's like, excuse me?
Right. Or they'll approve some watered-down version of care that, let's be honest, isn't even enough to make a difference. And by the time you've jumped through all their hoops, you're already drained, financially and emotionally.
Exactly. And there's this other book I came across. It's called Sickening by John Abramson. It breaks down how insurance companies form this, like, unholy alliance with pharmaceutical giants. They both profit off our sickness. It's this whole cycle of exploitation.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it. I mean, it's all about gaming the system, right? Pharmaceutical companies charge insane prices, and insurers push those costs back onto patients in the form of higher deductibles or premiums. And instead of fixing the system, they just normalize it.
And let's not forget your Effects on the Side podcast. You really dig into pharma, and whoa, the side effects you talk about are unreal. People literally dying as a side effect of so many different drugs. It's cruel.
That is an in-depth podcast I do for sure, and thanks for bringing it up. But let's get back to what we are talking about here. That delay tactic, it's calculated. They drag it out, hoping people either give up or, run out of time.
Yeah, and here's the wild part. These companies have the data. They know exactly what these delays cost in real lives. Delays lead to deaths, and they just factor it into their bottom line. It's horrifying.
It's almost like they've turned being heartless into a business strategy. And let's be real, that's not just a hypothetical. There's documented evidence of executives strategizing around these very tactics.
And what about the fraud part? Like, how often do you hear about insurers refusing to cover something they're contractually obligated to pay for? Or blaming the patient for some minuscule technicality?
Oh yeah, and by the time you've sorted it out or hired a lawyer, you're 6 feet under, metaphorically or, well, literally.
It's systemic abuse, plain and simple. And what's worse, when these same companies team up with Big Pharma, it's like adding jet fuel to an already blazing fire.
Yeah, these practices are very likely why Luigi, did his thing.
All right, now let's shift focus to another piece of this puzzle, the so-called gatekeepers of public health, the FDA and the CDC. You'd think their main role would be to shield us from harm, right? But when you start digging, it's clear that their actions often tell a different story.
Yeah. The lines get really blurry when you think about the revolving door between these agencies and the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, how many former FDA officials end up in cushy pharma boardroom jobs?
Exactly. And vice versa, too. Big Pharma execs taking positions in regulatory agencies. Essentially, they're writing the rules for their own game.
Right? And the problem is, it creates this conflict of interest. Like, are these agencies really independent? Or are they leaning toward the companies they're supposed to oversee?
And let's not forget the incentives, too. If you're someone at one of these agencies, blocking a drug approval could maybe cost you a high-paying job in the private sector later. That's got to change how decisions are made.
Totally. And the speed at which some drugs get approved? It's giving me whiplash. I mean, sure, people want fast access to potentially life-saving treatments. But these companies are cutting corners under the guise of urgency and lying with data to push things through.
Case in point, the rushed COVID-19 vaccines. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all in favor of vaccines saving lives, but you can't tell me there wasn't pressure to approve it fast for, let's say, political reasons, or financial, or both?
Yeah, and here's the thing. That speed, while impressive, isn't always about helping people faster. Sometimes It's so companies can rake in those profits before competitors catch up. And sometimes, the safety checks just aren't what they should be.
Or they're skipped entirely. I mean, later reports revealed the FDA approved some drugs with missing trial data or no long-term studies. Like, how does that help anyone? Except the guys cashing the checks.
And don't even get me started on when the adverse effects start rolling in. The regulators rely on post-market surveillance, which is basically like saying, we'll fix it after something terrible happens.
Translation: you're the guinea pig. And when the lawsuits start piling up, guess who ends up footing that bill? Hint, it's not the CEOs.
Exactly. And it all comes back to accountability. Or, more accurately, the lack of it. These agencies are supposed to act as watchdogs, but honestly, they're looking more like lapdogs.
All right, building on that lack of oversight, we saw it in full swing during the pandemic. Pfizer, Moderna, the profits they made. Unbelievable. They're not just celebrating, they're practically swimming in cash.
Yeah, like, their profits didn't just go up. They skyrocketed. We're talking billions. Pfizer alone made, $37 billion on its vaccine in just 1 year.
And it's wild to think about the scale. These vaccines became the fastest-selling drugs in history. I mean, look, COVID-19 turned into this once-in-a-generation opportunity, and Big Pharma didn't waste a second.
Right. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Governments, like our tax dollars, were footing the bill for research, guaranteeing pre-orders, and even limiting liability, all while these companies were raking in record-breaking revenues.
Yeah, it's like the perfect storm for profits. But you know what's even worse? The secrecy. Contracts with governments, totally redacted. No transparency about pricing or development costs. Just, here's your vaccine, don't ask questions.
Exactly. And let's not forget, most of the research for these vaccines was backed by taxpayer money. Yet, instead of making them accessible globally, we've got wealthy countries hoarding doses while others, they're left waiting.
Or worse, priced out completely. Like, how is it even ethical to profit so massively off a crisis that was being said to be killing millions of people, even if it wasn't?
It's not. And that's part of the problem, right? It's not just about making money. It's about who has control. These companies had the world in a chokehold. Need vaccines? Pay up?
And let's not even get started on intellectual property rights. The TRIPS waiver? Such a mess. Countries begged for temporary lifts so they could produce generic vaccines, and Big Pharma fought it tooth and nail.
Yeah, they claimed it would slow innovation or compromise quality. But honestly, it seemed more about protecting profits than protecting people.
And this isn't even a one-off phenomenon. Pandemics create perfect opportunities for companies like these. They'll develop treatments, sure, but also profit from the panic, the urgency, the desperation.
Right. And let's not forget, when the dust settled and boosters hit the market, even more money. They're finding ways to turn a health crisis into an ongoing subscription model.
Yeah, it's like Netflix, but for your immune system. But this subscription will kill you. All right, Jason, so we've talked about profits driving healthcare decisions, but let's pivot. Digital health, AI-controlled medicine. It's like Big Pharma meets Silicon Valley. Sounds like the plot of a Black Mirror episode, but here we are, right?
Yeah, we're living it. I mean, think about it. AI diagnosing illnesses faster than a doctor. Wearables tracking everything from your heartbeat to how well you sleep. It's like medicine is getting this major tech upgrade.
Sure, but here's the thing. Upgrades come with glitches, right? Like, what's the catch? We're talking about putting human health in the hands of algorithms. And last I checked, machines don't exactly have, compassion.
True, but on the flip side, algorithms aren't biased. They don't get tired. They don't miss things because they're overworked. AI can process data from millions of cases, making connections no human could spot. That's huge.
But can they be trusted? I mean, if the data they're trained on is flawed or skewed, won't they spit out those same biases? Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Oh, totally. That's the big risk. AI needs good data to make good decisions. But if your training data underrepresents certain groups or diseases, it's like, I don't know, teaching a student half the syllabus and expecting them to ace the test.
And who's controlling that data? Big Pharma, insurance companies, tech giants, none of whom have an amazing track record of putting people before profits. Let's just say I'm not rushing to call this a silver bullet.
Fair point. And yeah, the tech industry's takeover of healthcare raises serious red flags. It's kind of like handing them the keys to the kingdom and, hoping they don't lock you out.
Exactly. And let's not even talk about the privacy side of things. I mean, companies already know what you shop for, where you go. Now they'll know your blood pressure and cholesterol levels too. Feels a little, what's the word? Dystopian.
It is kinda. But it's also where things are headed. Personalized medicine. That's the promise. Treatments and drugs tailored specifically to your DNA. It's revolutionary. Scary, but revolutionary.
Sure, until it becomes pay-to-play healthcare. Imagine getting top-of-the-line treatments just because you can afford the premium subscription package. Everyone else? They're stuck with generic algorithms and budget tier outcomes.
And that's the thing. It's a glimpse into the next crisis waiting to happen. If digital health and AI widen the healthcare gap instead of bridging it, well, things could get ugly fast. Right. And that's just scratching the surface. If AI and digital health are already raising these tough questions, it's clear the broader healthcare system isn't much better off. I mean, when you've got Big Pharma, insurance tactics, and all these competing agendas, you end up with a machine optimized for profit, not for people.
Right, and you kind of have to step back and ask, like, can it even be fixed, or is it too big, too entrenched? The numbers, the players, the sheer scale of it all, it feels overwhelming, but
Here's the thing. Change feels impossible until it happens. We've seen this pattern before. Public pressure can shift the narrative. Regulation, accountability, advocacy. The system fights back, but it's not unbeatable.
exactly. Everyone listening, it starts with knowing how things work, being informed. I mean, if we just sit this one out, nothing changes, right? But imagine if enough people start asking tougher questions, pushing for transparency, for affordability, for better oversight.
Those are the real levers of change. And honestly, it goes beyond individuals. We need systemic fixes. Policies that aren't influenced by lobbying dollars or public relations. Spin. It means speaking out, voting with this in mind, supporting groups that fight for healthcare reform.
Like, even small steps add up. Signing petitions, sharing stories, it all matters. And yeah, it's a fight, but it's one we can't afford to ignore. This system affects everyone. And let's be real, it's not going to fix itself.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot today. The pricing schemes, the opioid crisis, the loopholes in regulation, the pandemic gold rush. It all paints a pretty grim picture, but knowledge is the first step. Change starts when you see the system for what it really is.
And what you do about it. So, yeah, stay informed, stay loud, and don't let this stuff slip under the radar. The system counts on us being quiet. Let's not give them that satisfaction.
Well said. And with that, I think we must bid you adieu. Thanks for digging into this complicated, messed up world with us. It's not easy to hear, but it's necessary.
Yeah, important conversations, right? And hey, to everyone listening, thanks for sticking with us. Don't forget to share this episode, like it, and subscribe. And maybe even, start a conversation of your own. Catch us on the next episode, Media Manipulation, the War on Truth.
Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Exposed and Unfiltered.